Hello, my friends. Welcome to The Movement. I'm Dan Unitas. Jumping into it, I wanted to talk today about common issues facing men. I've been part of the men's support group space for a bit, and I've noticed some trends among men, kind of common issues that they're searching for. So I wanted to highlight those today. I think a big part of the men's support group experience is the notion of seeking out help, seeking out answers, and seeking out other men and to kind of converse with and have community with. And I think a big part of the therapeutic aspect of it is just understanding that other men are suffering through similar things that you're going through. And the same goes for women. I think it's a very human thing to, I think we tend to suffer through things in alone and in silence for a while until we feel like it gets too much for us, and then it reaches a point where we feel like, hey, I can't solve this on my own. Let me go talk to other people and get some answers about this. And once you make that step and you go a little further, you very quickly find that you're not alone and that many people are probably suffering from the exact same thing that you suffer from. And for whatever reason, that just has a very calming effect, because it makes you feel like, hey, I'm not alone in this. Many people have gone through this. Many people will go through this after me. And so I think it's a great way to become part of a community where you can kind of, I think, and speaking to men specifically, I think a lot of times men grow up and we, for whatever reason, we tend to find ourselves, fraught with isolation and feeling the idea that, I don't have that many friends around me, but the friends that I do have, we don't typically do a deep dive and engage in a lot of the issues that are facing me. And so we tend to get this idea that this fallacy that other men are not going through problems that we are going through, and we also tend to get this assumption that other men just kind of have their act together and everything's sunshine and rainbows. And so there's a bit of kind of like assumptions being made that are actually somewhat harmful, because it isolates us from other people. If we feel intimidated and feel like, all of these other people have their lives together and I don't, what does that say about me? I don't want to expose myself as being kind of like a basket case and these types of things. So we effectively, as men, I think women will tend to connect with each other more readily. I think it comes more naturally for women to reach out and join groups, particularly online, but also have very tight knit friendships with women and kind of do deep dives on where they're at emotionally and things that are going on in their lives. And this is a great way, provided the friend is has your back and is positive towards you, to get support and get encouragement that you're on the right track, and to bounce ideas off of. So I think men typically don't arrive there as easily, but when they do, it's a really great experience for men, because then you just realize, hey, all of these other men that are out here, they're just like me. I'm no different than them, and they're no different than me. And I can actually have a sense of bonding and a sense of brotherhood and a sense of love and connection with men. Whereas previously, I didn't have any notion of that. And I was actually, had a lot of internalized intimidation and kind of just the idea of with men jockeying for position in some sort of just kind of a weird way. So anyways, without further ado, I want to jump into the list. So common issues facing men today. Again, this is coming from like a lot of some years in dealing with men's support groups. First one on the list is nice guy syndrome. So there's a guy, I can't remember, I'm terrible that I don't remember the guy's name. I think it's Glover. He wrote a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy, and the topic of the book, that's a whole can of worms. It could be like a series of videos, really. But the idea of the No More Mr. Nice Guy, it's not that men shouldn't be nice and men shouldn't be kind. That's not what it is at all. And I don't want it to get confused with this notion of this kind of like alpha male movement, where it's just like, hey, you got to be a jerk to attract women or something like that. It's not like that at all. It's more about the idea that men can, have low self-worth, low self-esteem, and then what they do is, because they don't internally feel worthy of a great partner, what they try to do is they put the woman on a pedestal, and then they worship the woman and basically throw themselves at the woman's feet. They're not able to enforce any sort of boundaries. It's all about, typically what happens in these relationships is that a man will get with a woman, and then he's really fixated on making her happy, and it's all about her. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be kind and giving towards a woman. I absolutely think in a healthy marriage to me is like, a man really wants to make his wife happy, and he loves her dearly, just as he loves anybody in his family. And he wants her to be happy, and so he will do nice things for her, and he will be caring and considerate of her emotions and her feelings, and want to be supportive of her at all times, and treat her with love and respect and kindness. But this notion is what I'm talking about with the Mr. Nice Guy syndrome, is the idea that the man is not getting anything out of the relationship, and he will do a lot of things. So he won't have any boundaries, so we'll let the woman push him all around, but then he'll, by giving to the woman in this way and making himself subservient, or just doing whatever she wants, oh, you're unhappy, what can I do, falling all over himself, and not really asserting himself in terms of what he wants in life, or what his desires are, and being an equal in the relationship. It's putting himself lower so that he can kind of have this relationship, and that's not good. Relationships, for both men and women, you can't place yourself lower than the other person. You're not going to have a happy and successful relationship in that fashion. So, kind of a sneaking thing that happens in these relationships with these Mr. Nice Guys is that what they'll do is they'll give a lot, but they'll expect things in return, but they won't be straightforward with what they want in return. So for instance, like a common one would be, hey, I'm going to go fall all over myself to kind of give my wife this, a lot of romantic gestures, or kind of give her what she wants in terms of where we're going on vacation or stuff, but I'm inherently expecting, favors in return, either, sex or, other things that men would want that their partners to kind of just do for them, right? And so it's called covert contracts. I do something for you, but I'm secretly expecting that you're going to do something reciprocally for me. And then when they don't, then the man feels slighted and feels frustrated, and there's resentment. So typically with Mr. Nice Guy syndrome, there's a lot of resentment, and these relationships don't end up being successful, and they can go on for a long time because again, like the man might treat the woman very well, but at the end of the day, relationships always have to be a two-way street. So again, it's not any sort of like alpha male type stuff, treat women poorly, don't be nice, or anything like that. It's just the idea that men struggle with enforcing boundaries. In the book, the guy talks about, he would work with men on an individual basis, and he would say, hey, look, we're going to work on boundaries. So I'm going to start pushing you. We're going to start in the middle of the room, and I'm going to start pushing you back. And when you feel that I've crossed your boundary, you stop me from pushing you. So then he would say go, and then he'd start pushing the men, and then he'd push them back a couple feet, then more, then more, then more. And then by the time, he pushes the men all the way back to the wall, and it's like, well, when are you going to start pushing back? And so inherent to the nice guy syndrome is an inability to set healthy boundaries. And I've dealt with this in my own life, and this is absolutely true. You have to be able to set boundaries. You have to show up as an equal in the relationship. A lot of men have struggled with this. I think a lot of men have kind of, it's safer, it's easier to just, avoid conflict. And this is kind of like puts a lot of the stuff on its head, based on societal perceptions of men being tough, men kind of, being lacking in emotion and just kind of pursuing what they want. And it's just, I think a lot of men have been raised by women and have been, kind of been learned to be deferential towards women, but it gets to a fault where, relate again, just on the basics. I think for both men and women, a relationship can't thrive unless both people show up and both people feel that they are equals to each other and deserving of boundaries and deserving of happiness. And being vocal about that and setting boundaries. I think that's essential for women to develop that skill. I think that's essential for men. Moving on, loneliness. Loneliness is a huge issue facing men. It's one of the most common ones that I see when I'm kind of in like men's support groups, and it's interesting because a lot of men they're very much, again, they've been suffering in silence for a long time and just feeling, particularly after a divorce, issues with child custody disputes. Some men will just find themselves, I was dedicated to my marriage for a decade, 2 decades, whatever. Now all of a sudden I found myself completely alone. I don't have any male friends because I was still dedicated to my relationship. This is extremely common. It's also extremely common among young men as well. because we're just not leaving the house as much. You know, we live in an increasingly digital world. People are kind of isolated in and of themselves at home, watching TV, playing video games, just kind of drinking, smoking weed, just kind of alone. And they're lacking in that connection. So a lot of men will kind of find themselves in a men's support group looking for connection with other men, which I think is great. But something I say frequently to men is just that the notion that I do think male loneliness is a massive thing. It's very real, and it's very affects men, and it's very hard. And a lot of men are looking for connection, and I think that that's great. But I also kind of always feel like I like to. And it's not that I like to do it, but just I feel, for me, I feel like I'm somewhat of a realist with male loneliness. I feel like it's to a certain degree, loneliness within men is inherent, and it's just how it is. I'm married, I have children, and other men are married and have children as well. The people that are going to be in my circle, right, or that people that are around me in a neighborhood, they're also going to be doing the same thing I'm doing, right? So most nights it's like you're spending time helping your kids with homework, or you're if you're focused on spending time with your wife, or spending quality fun times with your family. And that's just the long and short of it. I mean, that's just how it is. So if you try to connect with other guys, hey, let's go out for a beer, let's connect, let's have a poker night. It's going to be fraught with issues in terms of scheduling, and then just trying to get stuff off the ground. So it's not necessarily, I don't, I'm not trying to say men should be lonely and this is how it is and just get, it's just. But I do think from a realistic perspective, there are very real barriers in our society to men getting, connecting with other men on a regular basis outside of work. And I think for me, I think just again, this falls into that category of just acknowledging that it's a problem. But I don't necessarily think, I think it's good for men to kind of dispel this idea of men having massive robust social groups, right? Like, oh, this guy goes out with his golf buddies all the time, and they're going on these vacations together, and they have all these very deep friendships and things like that. I honestly, I think that's to some degree, I think that's a fallacy, and I think that's one kind of just idea of this lifestyle that's out there that really isn't as prevalent as maybe we would like it to believe it, right? Like, we all have the notion of, oh, when I retire, I'm going to move to some place out of the way where I don't have to see people all the time, and life's going to be a slower pace, and I'm going to live on an island and this kind of stuff. I think a lot of us have fantasies about this kind of like far off idea in the future of this dream life, and I honestly, is that a reality? I'm not sure. I'm sure to some degree you could find that, but I just think with men, it's important to realize, hey, a lot of men are affected by loneliness. You are not alone, and it's real. The emotions you feel are real, and it's upsetting. It's hard to be in a house by yourself with nothing to do on a 5 days in a row, and you just kind of beating your head against the wall. My advice for men out there that are dealing with loneliness, I would say, first, it's just as I've been talking about, understand that this is very common among men. It's one of the most common things. Secondly, I would say, get out there and try to join any sort of group. I used to do Krav Maga, which is this martial arts, like Israeli self-defense type thing, where you're practicing chokes and getting choked, and defenses, you're punching, you're kicking, and so it's an opportunity to go to a gym and train with other men. You typically, within Krav Maga, you would pair up and you would kind of train with each other, which I think is really excellent for men to kind of test their might, as it were, against other men, and kind of test their mettle. I think there's a lot of opportunities to connect with other men, which I think is extremely healthy. And then the notion of kind of just boosting your own self-esteem and your own sense of power and physical strength. What else on the topic of loneliness? Just with that, in joining a gym, you don't have to necessarily have massive social connections. That's one of the things I realized when I had joined that Krav Maga gym. Is like, you get to become a regular there. You get, maybe 10, 15 minutes before class, after class, when you're taking off your gear or getting suited up. And you just have, just kind of fun conversations. It feels good to be part of a social group outside of work, right? It's a diverse group of people that one guy might be work as an EMT, another guy might be a doctor, another guy, might be a fireman. and it was just fun. For me, it was just fun to kind of just be around other guys, and there's women in the class as well, and so you just kind of be. It's just kind of fun to have a light element of a sociability and say, hey, this is I belong to this group and I see them a few times a week and it's kind of fun. We don't, it doesn't necessarily have to be extremely more depth than that to be rewarding. I've found, I think that's another thing that I want to talk about. Loneliness is, men, just understand that, a lot of times we build these things up in our head of like, oh my God, I'm in extreme loneliness. And I've been there. It feels that way. You feel locked. You feel, we in America, we enjoy a lot of economic prosperity, despite the fact that we're kind of going through some hard times right now. But it's like, well, I have this house, I have my home, my dwelling, but effectively it feels like a prison because I don't have anybody to welcome into it. I've got all these neighbors around me, but I feel like I'm the loneliest guy in the world. So it's easy to kind of have your loneliness kind of rise to these extreme heights and feel really lost and just in despair. And so my advice is just to realize, don't just think that, oh my God, woe is me, and nothing's ever going to change. For me, when I joined that Krav Maga gym, it was just like a couple nights a week, and it really did alleviate a lot of my feelings of just kind of loneliness. And I think that's true for a lot of things within your life. If you just, everything in moderation. If you just go, don't take your issues to a catastrophic level. Have some hope that if you start making some strides on it, you can have a change in your kind of mindset, change in your overall well-being. Moving on to the next one, substance abuse. This is one as old as time. I think men in general really do struggle with alcohol. Men struggle with weed. Obviously, men struggle with more hard substances, but I typically find that to be a little bit more rare in my work that I've done with men's support stuff. But yeah, weed and alcohol. I think that people can be daily users of that. It can really drag them down. It can make them feel, rob them of, there was a question the other day, or I saw this online. It was the idea of like asking older men what they would have done if they got to redo their life, right? If you could go back to a time when you're much younger, what would you do? And one of the guys said, I would stop drinking. And so, I think drinking is drinking and smoking weed is one of those things that just kind of creeps in. It's just, it's readily available. It's actually insane if you go to any grocery store now, particularly where I'm at. It's just the amount of different brands on the shelf in terms of beer, wine, and now the market for these spritzers or whatever, these hard seltzer waters. It's just like insane. It's almost like there's like 3 or 4 dedicated aisles to alcohol, and that's really wild if you think about that. I think that they would not dedicate. If you just think about that for 1 second, if you think about like, well, how many aisles are devoted to cereal? It's 1 aisle. How many aisles are devoted to bread? 1. How many aisles are devoted to alcohol? Like 4. That's crazy. It's really crazy if you think about it. And so, it's really not something to laugh at, because I do think it's massively affects people in a negative way, but it's a bit odd. So, I think a lot of people kind of get into this funk of using weed, using alcohol as a way to just kind of get by. It makes you feel good, it makes you feel happy, and I don't know what to say about it. I think we live in times that we feel increasing anxiety. I feel like we feel like are fractious in regard to our country, and I think there's a lot of reasons why we feel kind of down to the dumps, but I think alcohol and weed are always going to be something that people turn to because it's just an excuse. It's just an escape. It's a way to self-medicate, and it's a way to kind of like just have some happiness, but ultimately there can be very negative effects in regard to drinking way too much, becoming dependent, and then if you're constantly either buzzed or three sheets to the wind. Relationships are all about showing up, right? For your marriage and for your relationship with your kids, it's about showing up and being there and being coherent, and being an emotional support for your family, being an emotional support for your wife and your children, and understanding them and giving them love and encouragement. And if you're wasted, and if you're super high on weed, it makes that difficult, and it's going to be more about your self pleasure and just the idea of just having a good time and kind of just being diluted and just kind of getting through the day. So I it's something that a lot of men struggle with, and yeah, that's all I'll say about that. Moving on. This one is, I think, maybe surprising to men, but it comes up so frequently. It's anger. I think men frequently struggle with anger, and but we don't always know it. And I think it's one of those things where, kind of like, you can. I don't want to say like men will live in denial, but I do think that men can kind of live and not understand how angry they are until something happens where maybe all of a sudden their relationship is threatened. Their wife says, "Hey, like I've just been living with your anger for years, and you are just I can't take it anymore. You're an angry person." And for the man, that it's like a shotgun blast to the face. It's like, "Oh my God, I did not realize how angry I was being." And a lot of men will feel, particularly when you have kids and you got work, you got your marriage that you want to maintain and think on. You want to be supportive of your wife. You've got your kids. There's a lot of stress with kids. Carting them around the town, homework, just emotional development. Kids go from being little kids to big kids, and then all of a sudden kind of hit this like teenage year where it just feels like the kid that you knew just kind of fades away, and they don't want anything to do with you. And all of a sudden you might be running into behavioral problems. You might be running into issues where your kid's failing at school, or they're dealing with ADHD, or they're dealing with being overly defiant, and there's a lot of stress. And so I think a common way that men can just deal with it intuitively is just to yell, to get upset, and try to like put your foot down, shake your fist at somebody, and just be short with people. And then I think when men are overwhelmed and they're stressed, they anger is kind of like a first resort. It's kind of interesting. I do just anecdotally, I do feel that women can kind of be, some women can kind of be just more caring. And there's that idea, I love my children and I'll never cross that, and I won't get upset with them. And I think for men, it's like, I love my kids deeply, but at the same time, it's like, if they're doing something that I feel like they shouldn't be doing, it's just they're not thinking about something, or they're not picking up after themselves, or carrying their own weight, or they're being dishonest. I think it's men, just something bubbles up. It's like an aggression of like, this is, I can't stand this, that you're doing this. Why did you lie to me? And in talking with other men, I actually had I know I'm going on here for a while here, but I had an interesting conversation with guys in my support group, and my son had broken something, and I felt that he was being deceptive about how it had broken. I think he was trying to play it off like he had dropped something, and in fact, I felt that he got frustrated and chucked it to the ground, and it broke. And it was this expensive electronic device. So I was very upset, and I kind of yelled at him, and I told him I was really upset that I called him out for lying and this and that. I went to my support group and I kind of talked to them, and I wanted to get their impression, because I do feel like I was feeling like a compulsion that other men would feel that I should be tough and that I should be have come down hard on him. And so I was kind of just touching base and seeing what other men would give in terms of advice, because it's like, do you go hard, do you go soft, what's effective? And it's like, do if you go soft, is that coddling the kid and ultimately setting them up for failure later on, because they can't take responsibility for anything? So I was just trying to basically say, it was a frustrating moment with my kid, and my response was anger. And actually, I was surprised. One of the guys in my group actually talked about how his son suffers from autism, and so his son had broken something, and he was the son was very hesitant and nervous about the dad getting angry at him when he approached him, and with having broken this thing. And the dad actually said, he felt a compulsion maybe a little bit to get anger, but he quickly kind of stifled that, and he said that this anger is not really going to do anything, and I want to approach my son and have this be like a teachable moment or whatever. And I think that's so great, and I think that anger issues among men, anger can be a very destructive force. when applied in an inappropriate manner, or when applied too liberally, and or as applied as a something as a substitute for really connecting. And I think guys get upset. I think guys get a lot going on. Women have a tremendous amount of things going on in terms of managing families, managing their life, managing their career, a lot of stuff. They're constantly working hard, and I think men have an overlap of shared kind of responsibilities and stress in that regard. I think men are a different animal and handle things differently, handle their emotions differently, handle just the approach and everything. So it's like, I think sometimes men can get overwhelmed, and then the anger is just like an immediate kind of reaction. It's just kind of like, I don't have anything left. Now I'm just angry, But it can be extremely destructive. I think I think one thing I really love about my wife is that she has patience for me as a man. I think that's a critical part of a successful marriage. I don't think in no way would I advocate for a woman taking abuse from a man and long term. But I do think for me, it's just like, I do think men struggle with anger, and it's a very real thing. And you can't just tell men, oh, just figure it out, and you don't deserve us, and this time. I think, for me, I'm big on the idea of accepting, men and women accepting each other. And so for me, if I get angry and I feel that, man, that was really, I can see the reaction from my wife or see the reaction from my kids, and it just was not a positive interaction. My values, as I stay down here all the time, as I want to treat all my loved ones with love, well, not just my loved ones, but everybody, is the goal. I want to treat everyone with love, kindness, and respect. And so if I'm angry, you can be upset with people and you can be angry, but if I kind of just unwarranted, I was grouchy and I decided to fly off the handle, or put a little bit more mustard on something, that came off as disrespectful, and basically me just being upset. So I wanted to just dominate the vibe with my anger. I feel like a lot of men kind of will fall into that and say, oh man, I just kind of screwed it up. I think it's important for men to discuss this. I think it's important for, again, I think it's important for women to have patience and kind of back men up in regard to, hey, this is something that you're dealing with, but ultimately this isn't a positive thing in the family, and I support you in trying to, get over this and deal with this. I think that for me is like a great way to kind of handle that. And I think it's important for men to be remorseful and, try to do better all the time with that. So I've been talking on the anger issue for a while, but for me, that was a surprising one in talking with a lot of men in support groups, how many men struggle with the notion of anger. The next one is porn addiction. This one I feel like I was not really like keyed into. When just to real quick like recap, when I was a kid, you find your dad's Playboys, or even a generation before me was like finding pornography in the woods. like there would be some pervert in the neighborhood, and then he would have a whole stash of girly magazines, and he'd put it in the woods in a box or something like that. I don't know why that was like a trope, but that was a very real thing that you'd hear about. And then, but from my generation, it was more like, okay, like maybe your dad has some Playboy stashed away, and like as a kid, kids tend to snoop and you find some stuff. But then you have brothers or something that had hardcore magazines that showed very illicit sexual stuff going on. So, but nowadays, that was like, back in the time when it was a very physical thing, and if you wanted to go buy it, there was shame in going to the store and picking up a magazine, because it's like you very clearly know why the person is buying it. They're buying it to be very gratified visually by these women in the magazine. But now it's like we've taken away that shame element. We've taken away the physicalness of that element of pornography, where now it's just readily accessible. Anybody can access it within seconds, and it's kind of an interesting philosophical idea, because some people that are kind of negative towards men, it could just be like, oh, you should just be you should have the willpower to not be tempted, and oh my God, you're such a misogynist, and this and that, and like you're a terrible person for accessing this stuff, and I kind of would make an argument that because it's so readily available and because the access is so prevalent and high, it's almost like unfair. And again, I think people that are negative towards men and don't want to accept men as they are and want men to just dump on men would say something along the lines of like, oh, it really shows how sick men are. You know, they just can't control themselves. And it's like on a certain level, men are. You know, I think men need to conduct themselves in a way where, you know, we have to have, you know, a level of responsibility for our actions. And you can't just go out there and do destructive things and hurt people just for your own fulfillment, self-desires. But I do think men are, on some level, are very hardwired sexually to be attracted to women. And so it's just like the pornography is like crack cocaine, you know? And so it's like, the prevalency and the ability to get it really has caused a really an epidemic, I feel like, in our society. And then now that we have a larger and larger divide between men and women, with women having, you know, these expectations for men and men feeling like they just, you know, a lot of men and women just not getting along. And I feel like both sides feel like the other side is entitled. Both sides feel like the other side is immature. So as men and women have kind of had this wedge driven between them, men have kind of, you know, resorted a lot more towards pornography, also to the detriment of not even approaching real women, because they just are kind of being sexually gratified, you know, by themselves, and they kind of, then it doesn't make them hungry enough to go out there and actually get a real relationship. But also within relationships, you know, it's so readily available that it's being very destructive, and a lot of women are getting hurt because their male partners are turning to pornography, and they're feeling like, hey, I'm not enough, and you know, you're not only, you know, you're paying for this, you're paying large sums of money to cam girls or what have you, and it's just like, this is an addiction, and it's really ruinous. So I think pornography, you know, I think when I was a kid, it was just like, you know, this isn't a big deal. It's a very exciting type of thing. And then it's kind of like, oh, again, we have changing attitudes as culture evolves. And for me, I think my attitudes changed significantly as I've gotten older. And I think porn can be, it can be a way for people to kind of explore sexuality, explore different things, find things that they find different things that sexually is exciting to them. So I actually do think that on some level there's a benefit of having exploration in that field versus having no material where you can kind of understand what you actually like. But at the end of the day, I think for relationships wise, it's been highly corrosive and caused a lot of issues for men. So a lot of men are kind of on the train of, hey, how can I tackle this? What are some of the ways that I can. It's an addiction. It really is an addiction, just like the weed and the alcohol. And it's a lot of men find a lot of difficulty kicking that. The next one is divorce. A lot of times when men go to this is like a really big one. A lot of times when men go to a support group, they're looking for help from a divorce, and a lot of guys are completely blindsided by the divorce. A lot of men will be like, I was with this woman for 20 years, and then this is coming out of left field, and she just served me with papers. Also, a lot of men will feel like, hey, I was in this marriage and we were having some trouble, but I thought everything was cool. I thought we were just kind of doing all right. And it's what I found in the years of kind of being around this space is that a lot of times what happens is that women will kind of feel like the marriage is not going well, and then they'll have a time where they'll quietly disconnect and they'll make a decision in their head, I'm going to leave this guy, but they won't leave the relationship and they won't tell the guy that in the moment, and they kind of spend a lot of time figuring that out, that puzzle where it's like, yeah, I just think I'm done with this. So mentally they're kind of done, but maybe that's like subconscious for them, and it doesn't rise to the surface until a couple months later. So it's like, I think for women it's like an evolution, and where it's ultimately 6 months or a year goes by since this kind of event, and then all of a sudden when they show up to the guy, it's like, hey, I want a divorce from you, I want to leave, and the guy's like, well, wait a minute, this is coming out of left field. Let's work on this. We promised each other through sickness and health, and we promised in front of God and our friends and family that we would be together forever. So we have to work on this. And the woman just says, no, I don't want to do it. Or she'll kind of go through the motions, but her heart's not in it, and it's destined to fail. Men, a lot of times people don't know, but women file for divorce. I think the statistic is like 80% of the time, and if it's in college-educated families, it's like more something like 90% of the time. So that's really really stark, and that's really like it's really wild. And if you think about that stat, 80 to 90% of women, 80 to 90% of marriages are the divorce is filed. In the event of a divorce, 80 to 90% of those divorces were filed by the women. And so it kind of backs up what I'm saying about this kind of this notion that women kind of get tired of the thing, and then mentally they turn off, and then ultimately when they spring it on the guy, it feels like it's too late. And so guys ultimately grapple with these feelings of massive betrayal because they feel like the woman's done what they call the orangutan, or like an orangutan method, where effectively a woman won't let go of one branch until she's got another branch, she's holding on to. So a lot of times when women are ready to divorce, they've already got a plan of where they're going, and they're miles ahead of men. Maybe they got another guy lined up. I don't want to bash women. I don't want this to turn into like a bashing of women in that respect. But women typically, when they enter a divorce, are light years ahead of where the man is, because it's been kind of on their minds for a long time. So the man has a lot of catching up to do, and that's where women kind of come out way ahead. In regard to like negotiations and divorce proceedings and things like that, because the guy's still thinking like, well, hey, can we still save this? And she's already thinking about how everything's going to be split up. So guys going through a divorce, it's very heavy. And then on top of that, I do feel that the court systems are biased against men. Men are typically going to lose more of the assets, and then women are going to gain more child custody. And it's very, from a man's perspective, it's very difficult, because effectively, though it just feels difficult to get the access to your kids, and maybe just from how your life is set up, it might be difficult to take care of your kids. So now all of a sudden, your ex-wife is arguing that she should have the kids a lot more, and the more that she has the kids, the more you're going to have to pay child support. So it's like, oh great, you're going to take my kids, and then I have to pay you for the privilege of not seeing my kids. It's just, so divorce is inherently nasty. I do feel that the court systems are more biased to give women more the financial piece. People will say, oh, I want 50-50, but some states are more equitable distribution, not equal distribution. So they'll be like, oh, well, we want to set both people up for success. So hey, this guy makes more, he has more earning potential, so we're going to give the woman a lot more out of your assets to begin with. And for me, anyways, I have feelings on that, but divorce is ugly for men and women. And again, I don't want us to get in a habit of bashing women, but there's a reason why divorce is like a really big thing for men. They struggle with it tremendously. They struggle with the existential threat of having their kids being ripped from them and not having a relationship with them. There's the care and the love for the kids to say, okay, well, if my ex-wife turns my kids against me, then they won't have a positive father figure growing up, and then that's going to impact them. Financially, I'm ruined. It's just so many things going along with that. Anyways, divorce is obviously a big topic that deserves a series of videos on its own. The last thing I've been talking for a bit. I'm going to wrap up. The last one here is lack of support, feeling massively isolated or alone. And again, I kind of touched on this with the first thing, or second thing, with the loneliness aspect. But yeah, guys feel, especially when going through some of these issues, guys feel massively alone, and they feel like nobody, maybe they have one friend from high school that they still talk to, or maybe they have their parents they can kind of talk to. But it's really difficult, and so for me, I feel like there's an easy solution there, and it's to get help and to connect with people. So there's online support groups for men, as I've been kind of talking about. I've been in that space for a long time. There's divorce coaches out there. There's life coaches out there. And the big one that I want to always touch on is there's therapy out there. I had gone through a divorce that was a very difficult time in my life, and for whatever reason, I didn't pursue therapy, and that was really stupid. I look back on that time and like, man, I really needed support. But here's the deal. A lot of times when you're going through a hard time, you're financially stressed and you feel like I can't afford it. And if there's any men out there or any women out there listening, I just want to tell you, I say this all the time. Sometimes when you're dealing with life's hardest things, you can't afford not to go, okay? Therapy can absolutely help you. I think what happens, and I've seen this a lot in talking to guys, like sometimes they'll go to therapy and then they'll stop, and then 6 months later their life isn't going as well as it was in the past. And that's because a lot of times what happens with therapy or lack of therapy is I look at therapy as taking out the mental garbage. If you go to therapy once a week, you're sitting down with somebody and you're talking about the status of your life. You're talking about, where am I at? What's bugging me? Where do I want to be? And so for me, it's like, some people might give a negative rap to therapy, and like, oh, I don't want to be pursued perceived as a head case, or I don't, if I go to therapy a lot, I'm just one of those people that's wildly oversensitive and I can never get my act together, that type of stuff. And actually, a lot of people will say the more that you think about your life, the more unhappy you'll be. So there's a lot of negative perception of therapy out there. But for me, it's like, if you just think about, I'm going to take 1 hour per week, I'm going to talk with somebody else about my life, and I'm going to be intentional. I want to be planning. If I'm struggling with something, I want to bounce ideas off that person, and I want to try to work through that. From that perspective, if you look at it like that, therapy is actually a great thing. It's living your life intentionally, and it's trying to take out the mental garbage as you go so that it doesn't pile up. And to the point that I was making earlier, when people stop going to therapy, it's like, yeah, you stop going to therapy, and those garbage bags start to pile up. It's like living in a room and the bags are piling up. It's like, it's accumulating trash, and it smells, and it's hard to move around, and you feel claustrophobic. It feels like the walls are closing in. So I'm a big proponent of therapy. I think when you go to therapy, you start taking out, it's like going to the house of a hoarder, and it's just like, it's so claustrophobic, so it's, once you start taking out that mental garbage, it can make life more manageable. And that's what you want. You want to not have things accumulate to the point, because once stuff accumulates to a point where there's so much on your plate, you start to have these really, again, you feel like the walls are closing in, you feel like there's no hope, you feel like your sense of well-being is completely gone, and you're in a state of deep depression. So you got to stay on top of this stuff. So again, I tell men all the time, go find a support group of other men and connect with them. Honestly, that's super, super helpful to connect with other men and realize, hey, again, I'm no different than you. You're no different than me, and you can expand that to most men and to most women. You can feel, hey, everybody's got problems, and that's okay. Now you can connect with your own problems, but you can also be a support for other men. I want to just touch on that too. When you go to a support group, you go there with a problem for you. But then what ends up happening is, as you work through that, you start realizing, oh, I can support other people as well. And that is a massive transformational, experience where you say, I actually made a lot of progress on my problem. I don't need as much support anymore. But hey, here's a bunch of men, or here's a bunch of women that actually do need support, and I've gone through the process, so I can walk them through. And now all of a sudden, that's just a very amazing experience that I think is great for everybody to go through. Because now all of a sudden, you're not as focused on yourself. You're not feeling like your head's, you're drowning, and then you're able to help other people, which is a great feeling. I think I'll wrap up there. This has been The Moment with Dan Unitas, and thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed what I talked about, if you think it's important, please like and subscribe, and please let me know what you feel in the comments. I'd love to get a conversation going. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.